Hi, my name is Rob, and in this lesson we're going to apply classical counterpoint ideas on modern music of today to make new, rich and interesting compositions or make existing songs great again. So, what is counterpoint? Now, most music as we know it is based on a harmony where the melody can sit on. The notes of the chords that form the harmony do not create independent melody lines themselves, besides maybe a leading tone here and there. Writing in counterpoint, however, is a totally different concept. In counterpoint music, the music consists of multiple voices that are all independent in rhythm and melody. When played or sung together, the sum of the voices create a beautiful, logical and musical result. Well, most of the time. That's better. Every counterpoint composition evolves around melody rather than harmony. Still, the notes of the independent melodies imply a certain harmony. In counterpoint, we think horizontally following the development of the different melodies and voices, and not vertically in chords like in functional harmony. Now, we'll see that in depth later on. The concept counterpoint comes from the Latin words punctus contra punctum, which means point against point, so note against note. Now, you could say it describes the relation between two independent voices. Now, a great counterpoint composer is Johann Sebastian Bach. Or was it Taylor Swift? Nah, it was Bach. Take the bourrée in E minor, for instance, where both voices are independent, logical sounding melodies. The bass line goes like this. And the melody goes like this. The sum of both voices is greater than the voices themselves. There are different forms of counterpoint techniques, and one form is composing three independent lines throughout a piece of music, like we just saw, but a more complex form is when a recurring theme is used, a so-called imitation. The most complex form, where Johann Sebastian Bach excelled, is the fugue, that can extend to 4 different voices, where each voice is built from a variation and repetition of the main theme. But also in pop and rock, you'll find good examples of interesting counterpoint composing. Just listen to the interlude of God Only Knows by the Beach Boys. Now, many pop songs have background singers that double the voices in thirds, for instance. Now, this is actually not counterpoint, but more harmony. These voices are not independent, because they all follow the same rhythm and same direction. From a classical perspective, there are many rules for counterpoint. But for modern music, there are 2 in particular that you should know. Now, one rule is that in counterpoint, parallel octaves, fifths and fourths are never used. And that is because these intervals sound much more like a thickening of the top voice than independent notes. They sound more like one note instead of 2. Now, of course, you can use fifths and octave intervals, but just not in parallel motion. Now, the other rule is that voices should move in contrary motion wherever that is possible. If one voice ascends, the other one descends. This is also present in the bourrée in E minor that we saw earlier. Now, counterpoint can be used with success in any style, actually. Certainly in jazz, but also in progressive rock and fusion, this technique can be put to practice for more depth, more melodic interest. And counterpoint will keep you from the streets. So, let's go for it! Describing scales and harmony with just 2 notes is an essential skill for every musician, like turning on the autotune for Taylor Swift. Anyways, we can do that with 2 lines that move in opposite directions. So, a contrary motion, like married couples. The bass line is a chromatic line from the root descending to the major third. The top top voice is a diatonic major scale with just one chromatic note, the flat fifth degree that we all know as the blue note in the pentatonic scale. Now the first note looks like a single note, but is in fact a so-called prime interval. It suggests two notes at the same pitch, and together they shine as a runny nose in a dance hall. Now even if there are only two notes sounding at the same time, you still be able to hear a whole chord progression, because our brain fills in the rest, like gossip. So let's see what chords these notes imply. Now we'll start with the tonic that is implied by the prime interval on C. The notes B and D imply a G major chord or G dominant 7th chord, which is the dominant chord in the C major key. The notes B flat and E can be seen as the 3rd and minor 7th of the C dominant 7th chord. That is the secondary dominant for the next chord F major, with the root F and the 3rd A. This is the subdominant in the C major key. The notes A flat and G flat are the root and the minor 7th of the A flat dominant 7th chord that serves as a tritone substitution that leads to the G major chord. That is implied by the octave on the note G. The next chord is again a secondary dominant, D dominant 7, that is implied by the notes F sharp and A, the 3rd and 5th of the dominant 7th chord. The dominant 7th chord resolves to G7, implied by the minor 7th F and the 3rd B. And this unstable tritone interval wants to resolve to the 3rd E and the root C of the C major chord. So in this counterpoint, we can hear this progression. So this makes it clear that even if there are only two voices present, we can still hear a complete harmonic picture. Thank you, Brian. Brain, not Brian. Brian has nothing to do with this. Now next we look at the application of modern music, right after this. Now today this video is sponsored by XVive, a company that makes high quality things that I truly like. Now one of the great innovative products that really stands out from similar products of other companies is this super lightweight and at the same time super sturdy G1 Butterfly stand. Now this stable yet compact full aluminium guitar stand weighs less than 800 grams and is covered with special silicone that protects your guitar. It can bear almost any type and any model guitar, for sure the common models and acoustic guitars, and in a sense it can even support a Strandberg guitar that has such an unorthodox form factor. Now it has 4 points that have contact with the floor and they say it's untippable, and I believe it. To unfold and fold is really quick and simple because of the strong magnets that hold the stand together. The beautiful thing is that when you fold it, it is small and light enough to fit in any gig bag or backpack. And as a bonus, you'll get a slick bag to keep the stand nice and clean. So perfect for on stage, in the studio and at home. I'm a fan. Now although it sounds like a disease, it is not. A Cantus Firmus means fixed melody, and it is used to compose counterpoint voices against a given melody. In its earliest form, a Cantus Firmus consisted of only long notes without a defined rhythm and only a few larger intervals. The rules were very strict, and there existed different levels of counterpoint called species. Composing counterpoint music with a Cantus Firmus started in the Middle Ages and was popular up to the Baroque era. Now here's an example of the Ave Maria with a Cantus Firmus and 2 counterpoint voices. Now in modern music we can create a successful counterpoint by using a given melody that serves as a modern variant of the Cantus Firmus, like the melody of the jazz standard All the Things You Are that I will use in the next example. But it could have been any song in any style, except for Taylor's. The melody of All the Things You Are is simple, and also the progression of the first 8 bars has no complex harmony. The original is in A flat major, but I transposed the song to G major because some of you might be a little bit intimidated by 4 flats. The circle progression in G major moves in 5-1 relations until it modulates to the new key B major. I added the D7 flat 9 and G major 7 sharp 11 and the C sharp minor 7 flat 5 chord to add some color and leading tones. Also, the melody is systematic and consists of a repeating motive. It sounds like this in its pure form. Now we can create counterpoint voices, and I started to change the bass line to an independent voice that moves a bit in contrary motion, which is, as I said before, characteristic for a counterpoint melody. This also means that the root isn't always played in the bass line. Sometimes I'll play the 3rd or 5th, sometimes the 7th or 9th. This idea creates a nice color. Now then I composed a simple counterpoint middle voice that also uses contrary motion. Now this counterpoint uses a tiny bit of imitation of the main melody, which is an often used technique for creating counterpoint voices. So here are the first 8 bars of my version of All the Things You Are with the counterpoint bass line and a counterpoint middle voice. Yeah, I know. Also, the famous song For the Love of God by Steve Vai can be destroyed with counterpoint. I often use this melody for examples in my videos because of its particular structure and its lyrical character. Now, it can be augmented with counterpoint voices. Especially this particular melody with long notes is very suited to be a Cantus Firmus that we encountered in the previous chapter of this video. Now, I wrote 2 modest counterpoint melodies against the genius and beautiful main theme of that song. In the process, I tried to use as much contrary movement and avoided parallel 4th, 5th and octave intervals. And also the notes that I used for the melody lines implied a harmony that was intended. So for instance, notes of the E minor chord, and notes of the F major 7 chord, and notes of the A minor added 9 chord. The theme and the 2 counterpoint voices sound like this on their own. Lead and voice 1. Lead and voice 2. The whole arrangement sounds like this. Now let's look at the concept where counterpoint meets functional harmony. A basic counterpoint figure that counterpoint composers in the Baroque era used in many of their compositions is this. So what's happening here? Now the melody is ascending while the bass line is descending. The chords that are implied are E minor over G, B over F sharp, and again E minor in the root position. So it's a 1-5-1 progression in E minor. The top voice and the bass line move in a contrary motion following the rules of counterpoint. Now you could even omit the middle voice to get a pure counterpoint concept. Now this idea is a staple in music of Johann Sebastian Bach and his contemporaries. You also hear this in a million of pop songs, if not more. Think of songs like Dust in the Wind, where the melody and the bass line move in the same sort of contrary motion in the key of C major. Now we can project this idea to become an interesting concept in a chord progression. Let's take Autumn Leaves because it has such an obvious chord progression and structure. It is a circle progression in A minor. This means that all the chords have a 5-1 relation within the key of A minor. Now let's listen to the first 8 bars. I will project this counterpoint idea on the chords of Autumn Leaves. Every chord is enhanced with a 1-5-1 progression in counterpoint voices. For instance, on the first A minor chord we'll play the A minor in first inversion, then the dominant E major in second inversion and the A minor chord in root position. If we use this idea on every chord, then it would sound alright. But we're just missing those beautiful 7th intervals, those 7th chords that colorize the progression. So we'll adapt each counterpoint measure so that the second tonic chord becomes a 7th chord. So A minor becomes A minor 7 by adding the minor 7th G. And D major becomes D dominant 7 by adding the note C. G major becomes G major 7. C major becomes C major 7. F sharp diminished becomes F sharp 7 flat 5. B major becomes B dominant 7. And E minor becomes E minor 7. Now we should tinker with the chords a little bit, because the note D will clash a bit with the C sharp of the A major chord. So we could change that into an A minor chord to get rid of the C sharp. And the same thing happens in bar 4, where the note C in the melody clashes with the third B of the G major chord. So we'll change that into a G sus4 chord that has no third B. I move the lowest counterpoint voice to the bass guitar. This bass line sounds like this. And this is how it sounds with all bells and whistles. So this is another counterpoint idea that works pretty. Now, Counterpoint is a great tool to add to your composer's toolbox to create strong multi-voice sections in your songs. You can use it to come up with more interesting bass lines or just write a line against the main melody. And although it originates from music that is written hundreds of years ago, it is a timeless concept and brings interest and depth to any style of music. Now, if you already have composed music, just try to implement a counterpoint voice. If not, try to come up with a simple melody line by yourself, or take an existing melody and write a counterpoint voice against it to practice. Now, I hope this was crystal clear for you, and more than that, I hope that you will use it to create some wild and beautiful music. Then I want to say thank you, Patreons, for your indispensable support, and thank you, subscribers, for subscribing, and thank you all for watching. And remember that I make ebooks of many of my tutorials that are bundled with supporting audio files. And you can find them in the Q Gemtrix ebook store. I see you next time. Bye.